It is 26 degrees here in Abuja, bright and sunny. Good morning. Welcome, Sunrise Daily. I'm Neota Egbe.
Good morning and welcome to a brand new week. I am Kayla Magwa.
It's October 28th. It's a Monday morning. Welcome to the show. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Let's see what's going on around the country as we look at the skies over Gombe Central area.
Indeed, 9 hours away from the nation's capital, Gombe City. On your screens right now is sunny in Gombe. And we heard from NIMET that they're expecting a lot of dust in this area. In fact, for most of the north, especially not central Nigeria, really, we're expecting a lot of dust days in the coming days. So if you're allergic, wear a mask. You know, if you know you don't want to catch a cough or feel ill or something that affects you personally, then wear a mask. So there we have it, Gombe Central area there. And of course, Gombe is a predominantly Fulani place. Half of the population is Fulani. But they have other tribes, Bulewa, Tera, Waja, Hausa as well in Gombe there. But it's a lovely city, a place that is poised for development. There's a lot of infrastructure that we hear is going to come on board. Some of them we've covered here. Some of them we've gone to Gombe to see how much infrastructure growth is going on there. But there is word that a lot more will be coming on board. So Gombe City there, and I think Nelton knows this place a little bit more intimately than most people.
Oh well, Gombe is one of those states/cities that, okay, the state capitals, and all of that, states/cities that's really rich in the sense that it's known for peanuts, or called groundnuts in Nigeria, and cotton, and a local trade center for sorghum, millet, cowpeas, cassava, that's manioc, beans, onions, and tobacco. It's a major collecting point, especially since the opening of the railroad in 1963. You hear that? 1963 was when the railroad was opened, and since then, Gombe has been like a melting pot for all of this things. But one of the most remarkable things you find in Gombe is the Gombe National Park.
Oh.
Yes, it's a place you would want to visit. Ayo.
As soon as you set it up, just let me know. I have more time in the coming days. But and what actually always comes to me every time we talk about these skylines, particularly for places in the north, which we have brought on to the viewer a few more times than others, is that it's not all doom in the north, in northern Nigeria. It's not all dark. This is Gombe State. Gombe State is in the north. And so let's have a different worldview when we talk about the north. And it's not everybody in the north. Come on, look at this. How is this much different from Lagos, or even, maybe even Abuja? So this is what we have here. So what is it that we can do to improve the lives of the people? And thank you, Nelta, for letting us know that there are mineral resources also in the north, apart from the cash crops that you have mentioned. So if we had all of this, we have all of this potential in Gombe State. And this is just one part of Gombe State, a sprawling expanse of land. What exactly do we need to do to improve the lives of the people? That's my take this morning, guys.
Indeed, Gombe is, well, there's so much talk about Gombe. Just before we leave this area here, Kayla.
Yeah.
So one of the most remarkable things about the Gombe National Park is the kind of primates that are found there.
Oh, yeah.
Now, some will say it's in northern Nigeria, so we shouldn't be having those kind of primates there. But listen to this, and this is the red colobus monkeys, the velvet monkeys, the olive baboons, among others, hippos, leopards, 11 snake species at the Gombe National Park, over 200 bird species in that park alone. It's honestly, as Ayo said, we'll find a way to set it up, and only Ayo will go.
No, we'll go. I want to go.
Kayla said only Ayo will go.
I want want to go. I'm going. We'll go together. It's okay. We'll leave Nelta behind. But the truth is, Gombe is very... And you see, those animals that you called many years ago, there was a hippo we all called Harry the hippo that was killed. You know, hippo, one of the issues that they had was, you know, a lot of hippos will attack the farms and things. And so a lot of coordination around these species and conservation areas, you know, and that's a very important conversation. I've been away for quite a while. And one of the things that you notice is that we have a lot of these animals across Nigeria. There's a lot of conservation areas, but the maintenance, I met a lovely lady who's in charge, who does forest conservation. That's what she does, you know. So the resources needed and the political will to ensure that these things are actually done properly and turn a lot of these areas into places that can actually generate revenue for the Nigerian people. Gombe specifically has had a lot of issues in the past, and we hope that a lot of that is sorted out.
Well, Mark, I was about to call you Mark, but one of the things that in this country, one of the things that we talk about is conservation and preservation of our natural resources. But we should also talk about things like the preservation of the rule of law, or boundaries, where boundaries are set, clearly marked out boundaries. And that comes to play in this matter that came to the fore over the weekend, the clash between the police and the NSCDC in Asaba. I mean, one would say, you know what, let's just see this video and then we'll come back and talk about this. So, Kayla,
I mean, it's very unfortunate.
So this is the story of a man who's at his duty post, where he was posted to at an estate, and then he's attacked by policemen. One would say the Nigeria Civil Defense Corps and the police are part of the security apparatus of this country, internal security to be precise. So both of them ought to be working together. It's like a team thing. So where they collaborate and, you know, cover up for each other, they're supposed to be working together to ensure that the citizens can sleep with their two eyes closed.
It's one of the most unfortunate stories.
And this is
very unfortunate.
This is just one of many clashes. We've had, this is one is NSCDC and the police. There's been the one about the police and the military. So at what point do we say, okay, you know what? Can we begin to educate these men and officers, or officers and men as the case may be, about their boundaries? Can lines be clearly drawn and say, this is where your duty stops and this is where this other person's duty begins? And besides that is also the fact that respect the uniform. I mean, what we're taught in social studies, I mean, growing up.
You can actually see from this video, listen, there's a whole background to this story. We were told that this place is called Elizabeth Estate. It's in Osun State. This NSCDC person was protecting, he was on duty there, and the police were coming to, you know, make an arrest at the estate. I have questions. Was the arrest made after all of this? What happened to the investigation that was going on before this clash? You know, and then looking at, we've seen the Osun State governor speak up. They had a meeting. He had a meeting with the heads of security agencies after this happened. And one of the things that he talked about was the fact that, look, there are a lot of operations. He actually called them rogue operations by security agencies. So you know, and it brings up the idea that there may be a lot of distrust going on. If we have an arrest that we're going to have at so and so place, why aren't we collaborating with the security agencies at that place to ensure that this arrest is done properly? What's the distrust that's going on there? And then it also brings up what Nelta talked about, which is the respect for each other. And that is where the Inspector General of Police's statement, which came up a few days ago, comes up. The Inspector General of Police said, we're committed to working together to ensure the safety of the Nigerian people. But that discipline that requires these agencies to respect each other and know that the Nigerian people are looking at you. It's more than how you feel about each other. It's more than interagency rivalries are rife all over the world. It happens. But it doesn't degenerate to where we have a viral video of a policeman beating up an NSCDC official, and then other issues that we have going on. In fact, one of the things that we heard the Osun State governor say was that the clashes between the police and civilians is becoming too much.
So, Keda, you know, I was going to say something like, growing up, we were taught that when you see the uniform of any security agent, be it military or whichever, as far as you see that uniform, in fact, that is the nation. So it's a mark of respect to the nation. So you do not abuse that uniform. Yes. So whichever uniform that they're wearing, the NSCDC, the police, or the military, when you see the uniform, first of all, respect the nation before you even talk about the person inside that uniform. That being said, the matter of constitution, we need to go back again to the constitution to say, okay, this is where the lines are drawn. The National Assembly needs to look into this matter and clearly draw the lines. Where there has to be a merger, let's merge. Where we need to scrap some, let's scrap some. And then clearly state out, this is where your duties are. This is where this other person's duties are. And if we need to get back to that state police conversation, some will say, if we're not able to manage what we have now, would we be able to manage a state police situation? That's a conversation out there, and everybody's discussing that. Some say we are ready, some say we're not ready. At the end of the day, it's not about being ready or not ready. There are laws that need to be followed through.
It's an unfortunate situation, but one that is developing, and we hear that an investigation is ongoing to find out what really happened and where the fault lines are. So we're waiting for the results of that investigation. But now let's take you through some of the things happening today in the nation's capital. I like this one. There is a conversation that is going on right now about women and the Constitution. So there's a Constitution amendment. The conversation is ongoing. Now, the International Legislative Dialogue on Women and Constitution Amendment in Nigeria. It's happening today in the nation's capital. I think we're going to be carrying this live on Channels Television as well. It brings me back to the women protest that we had a few years ago, where women were asking for particular amendments to be made to Nigeria's laws that they felt did not represent women properly or give us the short end of the stick, so to speak. So this conversation is ongoing. We'll bring it to you live, and I hope that some of those demands come up as well during this conversation.
Every form of constitution amendment, even those who are calling for, let's just put this constitution aside and do a fresh constitution.
You want a new one. You don't want an amendment, you want a brand new one.
Let's just have a constitution that everyone, and mark the word, everyone will respect. And it's clearly stated, and everyone respects the Constitution. Someone says, even as this one is, forget the amendment, let's just respect the Constitution as it is. If we respect it as it is, then we are going somewhere. But everyone needs to get
that's the conversation, isn't it? We have to, if we're going to respect something, that we have to be part of his making, isn't it? Which is where many people come up and say, look, this constitution is not the constitution of the people.
If we go down this route, we will not leave this
program
today.
All right, then we have, do we have one for the FCT? I think there's another live coverage that we have, but we'll get to that shortly. Let's take a look at business. We've got business today, and of course, it's going to be a very interesting conversation. The post-IMF World Bank annual meeting. I think we're going to hear a little bit about that as well during Business Morning today on Sunrise Daily, so we're looking forward to that conversation. I mean, I wonder where Ayo stands on all of this.
Well, I would have loved to go back to the issue we're talking about between the police and the NSCDC, because the IGP put out a statement, but then the NSCDC spokesperson also put out a statement, and guess how he described the issue? A barbaric police brutality. And the first question that I asked in my mind, okay, so this fellow said they drove recklessly into that estate. Police drove recklessly into that estate. You are wearing mufti, and the next thing you are doing is beating a fellow police officer. This is one of the reasons collaborations don't happen, because we tend to look down on other services. If a soldier was beating up a policeman like this, how will the policeman feel? I think we should occasionally just put our minds, into all of this. But maybe some of these issues, Nyota and Kayla, are part of what we have covered in the papers this morning. So let's take you right through the papers today.
Sundry issues pervade the front pages of the papers this morning. Let's begin with the Daily Independent, which leads with oil gas sector. Experts list how FG can ramp up production, attract investment, list solution to underwhelming agri sector performance. The details of that story continue on the inside pages of the paper this morning. Nigerian News Direct. NLC blames IMF World Bank for FG's decision to remove subsidy. Says advisories, policy recommendations responsible for economic woes. Details on page 4. The Daily Times is calling attention to an issue of concern. Withheld salaries. NASU SANU declare indefinite nationwide strike. Regrets that in spite of President Tinubu's approval for 50% 4 months withheld salaries to be paid, none of its members had received any payment. Says sincerity of government to their cause in doubt. Details of that story on the inside pages of the paper this morning. Nigerian Tribune calls our attention to our debt overhang of 134.3 trillion naira. Servicing costs undermine private investments, economic growth. Future income of Nigerians being used to service debts, according to an expert, may take 25 years to double size of economy at current growth rate. Details of that story you find on page 18 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Even more troubling is what you have on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. Hardship bites harder as North enters 8th day without electricity. Services grounded in hospitals, labs. Residents, frozen food dealers count losses. Vandals on the prowl, destroy transformers. Efforts to restore power ongoing. That's coming from TCN. My God. Well, the details of that story you find on page 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper. No less important is the story at the bottom of the page. The Guardian newspaper. Ramfak faults high cost of governance, seeks better prudence. The details of that story you find on page 6 of the paper today. Blueprint newspaper, Rivers crisis, Obongata Pandep committee moves to reconcile Wike Fubara. King Alfred Dietespiff, Teleomo, John Jonah, others rally support. That story continues on the inside pages of the paper. Vanguard newspaper, pressure mounts on Naira falls to 1,740 in parallel market. 8-month gain wiped out. NAFEM rate remains stable at 1,600. CBN sets to launch new forex trading system. Parallel market dealers project further depreciation. Monetary fiscal authorities hold divergent views. The details you'll find on the inside pages of the paper. New Telegraph. Transport costs. Nigerians appeal for FG's intervention as airfares skyrocket. Threat over insecurity, whole state of roads, as charges, fuel costs remain stable. Aviation ground handling firm to raise charges by over 300%. 70,000 naira for B737 no longer sustainable. That's according to Adjan Chair. Find the details on the inside pages of the paper today. Business Day has investors flock to mutual funds as assets jump 39%. More details on the inside pages of the paper this morning. Abuja Inquirer has scavengers fingered in Abuja building collapse. What does that mean? Unfortunately, look at the riders. 7 confirmed dead. Police, FEMD differ on collapsed location. FCTA dismisses report of 40 trapped. The details on the inside pages of the paper this morning. And these are some of the papers we have for you today.
The list of everyone who hasn't paid their ground rent.
So you can imagine
in the
that
papers today. So a lot is going on.
some are owing as little as 9,000 naira plus, and some are owing as much as millions of naira in the FCT, and the FCT is saying, pay up your ground rent. Hello. See what we're saying about just follow the constitution or the laws as it is. But there's someone here who would help us understand all this, follow the laws or obey the laws or not obey them. And he is a policy analyst. Please join me to welcome Dr. Emeka Okegu. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Good morning, Kela.
Good morning.
Good morning, Nato.
It's good to have you.
Good morning, Nigerian.
How have you been?
I'm good. Keeping
because
well.
I saw you when you were coming in, you were actually smiling. So it looks like the pressure amount on the naira falls to 1,700 naira to $1 is not exactly eating you that much, or facility deficit threatens new school curriculum, or Greek collapse. Why the FG should invest more in power sector is not really affecting you.
Okay, in one word, it's what's called the herd immunity. In another word, is what's called, what you call your socio-economic realities. You might add political, you might add legal, it's just realities. And in dealing with these realities, you don't just deal with the realities as they are in themselves. You try to make some sense out of it.
Yeah.
And in trying to make the sense out of it, the first question will be, is this alien? Is this about us? Is this global? I mean, this is where you now begin to want to do some thinking, probably, thinking it through, as they would say. It's not a dead nail. That's what's important. We are not in the throes of death either. Okay, it's all about now how you envisage that a liter of fuel is, 1,300. And you need to get full tank. The question will be, do you need to get full tank? If you have some other contending needs, okay? You don't need to get full tank to travel from Maitama to probably wherever it is you're going to.
That side is, do you really, do you need to even travel?
Okay, no, well, and then you talked about ground rents and all that. And like you said, is that a social need? Is that social responsibility to pay ground rent? Are they just fostering it on us, or has it been something that's been there all the while that people have willfully, deliberately neglected or have been very ignorant about? So you see, when you talk about citizens' rights and citizens' response, this is also where that handshake comes. The question will be, if we are enjoying infrastructure, have we ever enjoyed infrastructure? Would it be fair to say this infrastructure has been free? Would it also be right to say that government should be able to at least, do some social interventions in some areas? Now, this is what you need to uncouple. So whereas government is right to ask for ground rents, would it be expedient and proper, to ask for those ground rents at this point in time and then give the time, you're giving for it to be paid and people lose their properties? Okay, Neto, you mentioned 9,000. You might think it's small money, but you might be surprised that to some people, after this calculation of rent, food, electricity, whatever, that 9,000 becomes king. So you might be earning 300,000 and might not even have 9,000 to pay out immediately. Okay, so it's a difficult situation, no doubt about it. But what I tell people is what you saw me do: smile through it. Okay, no matter what it is, okay? Do not see it as an end.
But let's slow up a little bit here and pull back a bit.
Yes.
You've talked about all the things that are staring the citizenry and indeed the government in the face.
Yes.
And you've talked about how your own, how do you call it, say, protection mechanism.
Yes.
Smile through it.
Yes.
But in the course of that, you mentioned citizens' rights, citizens' responsibility.
Yes.
So swing it the other way, government's right and government's responsibility.
Yes.
So put the two on the two sides.
Yes.
It appears the weight right now is heavy. Mark the word appears. Is heavy on the citizens. And it looks like it's lighter on the government.
Now this is where you now have that point of rights and entitlement. Okay, this is where you now have that point where we now need to begin to now think about these new realities that are on the ground. That we are not going to be getting as much free lunches or parks as we used to get in the past. Okay, because hitherto, all you needed to do was back into a house. It didn't matter. Once you paid your rent, he didn't even remember that there was ground rent. He didn't even remember there were environmental fees. He didn't even remember there were fumigation fees until, you know, you either get a court summons or somebody comes to your gate to start making this demand. Because these things are not explicit, okay, when you're entering into some rental arrangement or when you are, you know, getting rights to be able to own or build a house. These are things that are not common. You don't see them in papers, except you see the people come around. And sometimes, and I've experienced it, somebody walks into your office with a bill and you're looking at millions. And the next thing is, how did I accumulate this? And it turns out that the last person who used the office or who used the house, okay, especially with NEPA in those days before, you know, the prepaid meters came. In fact, even with the prepaid meters, they will put somebody on some, I don't know how they make that arrangement. And then when the person leaves and a new tenant comes in, they now say to you, you need to clear the backlog, okay, that was on that property before, you know, you're given a meter or whatever. Now, these are where you're talking about these government responsibilities, and this is where I think government needs to clean up its act. Okay, it's one thing, yes, I think this announcement, you know, came 2 weeks or some, and then it says if you don't pay, you're going to be doing ABC. Of course, everybody's going to be running, you know, to the courts, and we're going to be having some pushback. And in trying to get these courts now intervene, you're also not getting that citizens buy-in. Because like my father says, you might get justice in a court, but you never get peace. So sometimes this citizen intervention, community engagement with government and citizenry might do a lot than us coming to say, oh, I'm giving you this deadline, when you know that people don't have this money. When you know a lot of people can afford it, especially those that now are jumping into the million, billion, you know, range. Some could have just bought that property with their retirement benefit, and then you didn't bother to go, you know, to get that ground rent for 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden you're landing a bill of 100 million or 10 million or even a naira on somebody, you know, who just moved in. So this is now to bring that component of government. And this is where the issues of data statistics, you know, come into play, right? When you are, like I told the guys that came, I said, listen, everybody has an email. Why would I wait for you for 3 years to walk into my office to come and deliver a bill? Why wouldn't you send it to my mail address? Everybody has a phone that can, you know, take some of these services. Why wouldn't you, you know, first and foremost, you have everybody's number, at least NIMC is supposed to have it, okay? If you have our BVN, you should be able to have our data. Now, the moment you tie me to this property like you've done, why wouldn't you send, you know, this bill to the email address on, you know, this registration document you have? So part of the request is also where government, I think, might need to up its game. But are you going to be paying what you're owing? Definitely yes.
I mean, the thing is, listening to you talk about that, it's very important also that citizens follow through on processes. You know, because you know, you're trying to own a house. You have to find out exactly what's going on, what's everything here. Go to the appropriate offices, find out what I'm supposed to pay, what am I supposed to owe, what am I supposed to do. It's many people, and I say this with no fear. Many people do not care about process in Nigeria. For many Nigerians, you do anywhere belle face. You do what you can. Keep moving. I remember one time trying to get. Let's check the tires of this car. Check the expiry date on the tires. All the tires were expired. Okay, so we need to change. He said, no, let's ride it until all of it falls off. And it's a behavior that many Nigerians, we ride it until the wheels fall off, and then we try to see what we can do at that point. But, you know, back to that conversation about the government and its people and this social contract that we have with government. We saw recently, of course, this cabinet reshuffle. And we've been talking, so many conversations around who was brought in, was this the right choice? Wasn't this supposed to reduce the cost of governance? Well, you're hiring more people. How are you reducing cost if you're hiring more people? With everything that's going on, we have to now start looking at setting the agenda for these offices. So let's talk a bit about that. Okay. With the reshuffling, what should these new ministers, the ones who are going to be brand new, let's start with that, what should they be having at the back of their minds? And for the ones who were moved from one place to the other, what should they be thinking about in their new offices?
Okay, in setting the agenda, we need to look at what you call a functional administrative process. Okay, this is where you get your standard operating practices or procedures, if you may. The first will be that for you to do anything, a PPA, plan program of action, any planning, you will need statistics. Okay, there are two ways you can generate statistics. You either generate it real time, okay, from primary sources, or you generate it from scoping studies and all that. So the first you need to do is to say, against what statistics are we, putting this plan into focus? And the first will be, who has this responsibility of generating these statistics? So in this stage now, it will be the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, because under them you have the MBS. And then in bringing the MBS into focus, you also need to, what's the carrying capacity of MBS to now generate these reliable, cogent, primary source statistics that will be aiding us in our planning? The story of another day, it could take 10 hours. For me, I have, my doubts about that carrying capacity, all right? Now, the second will be that when you now set this framework, okay, it now ties into now deliverables. So the deliverables are no longer political. They are now mathematical and statistical. They are now timelined and are now focused. They are now output-based and they are now result-oriented. At that level, you will now begin to now look at those critical ministries that you need to support with these statistics. For me, ministries like the new commissions, the new
Ministry of Regional Development,
will come into play because they will be needing, for me, that's the biggest and greatest of the operational ministries. But at the back end, I would say it will be, for me, the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, supported by the Ministry of Science and Technology. If you don't have this tripod, okay, because now when you have statistics and they are cogent, and we are saying in Abuja, X amount of people live here, okay, X amount of houses are here, it's easy for you to plan your transportation, it's easy for you to plan your energy, it's easy for you to even plan your water reticulation programs. But when you're plucking it, off the air, and with what happens in our budgeting system where you now have what they call subheads and envelopes, that begins to make a mess of the whole thing. Now, the next will be this new Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy, supported by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. Are you following what I'm saying now? Right. Because at this level, remember that at the level of the regional, commissions, you now have enough data. What can we do there? What are the gaps? What are the issues? Okay, especially regards human capital, especially regards your human resources that you need to be moving, those other places that are going to be helping you get productive forward. So when we set this agenda, it becomes a lot easier for you to now begin to probably mark them or match them or whatever.
It's interesting that you brought up the collaborations that are necessary in this agenda setting. But there was one ministry, there's a new one, the Livestock.
Oh, great. That's for me, again, I'm a proponent of creating that livestock ministry, but I think a lot of people have a wrong impression that is the Ministry of Cattle Rearing. And that's why you see a lot of people pushing back at it. But if we want to, truth be told, because of things that are beyond us as a country, and this is where you now bring in forced migration, this is where you now bring in the issues of climate change. Now, a lot of these cattle or livestock that you see strolling into or coming into Nigeria are on forced migration. They don't have any other choice than to move. So it's either death or you flee. And then when they are coming into this country, our areas, what they are looking for are greens. And to that animal, your vegetable is green, Your
but
Ugu
ranch,
is green.
though. Ranch.
Beautiful.
Do it like a business.
Now,
Ranch. Why are you moving animals around?
That's what I'm saying.
Even though I understand that this is it's a very strong conversation, especially for many people who do livestock development in northern Nigeria. But some of the biggest livestock companies that we have don't carry their cows around town. They ranch. Former President Muhammadu Buhari ranches. A lot of people who do this business, if you want to really enjoy the yield from your cattle, you ranch.
Understand it.
In Pakistan, that's one of their biggest businesses is the livestock business. In some parts of that country, everything from cheese to milk to meat to horn in one place. Everybody knows to hone in on what they do, run it like a business. Isn't that? It's because this preferential treatment, so to speak, is going to them who they can, oh no, we need to help them. Every other person who's running a business is thinking, well, I have a rabbitry. Can I put my rabbitry in the middle of Sokoro on the highway because there's grass there? They eat grass too. Okay, you know, so how do we ensure that this livestock ministry does what it is supposed to do? I think
it's important we put a proper, perspective to this. You've mentioned Pakistan. I thought you were also going to be talking about Botswana. Okay. What's happening here, you must take into consideration and the fact that 80% of the cattle you have here are on forced migration. So the first thing you need to do is to be able to create that framework that treats that cattle as refugees, both cattle and their owners. That's the first thing. And in doing so, you must be able to create what we call integrator points. It is at that level of creating your integrator points that I can now begin to now do documentation and classification. And this is after that you can now begin to talk about your ranching. Okay? Now, first and foremost, you have people that are running for life. Now, the first thing you do when you see somebody is to hold the person and say, calm down, all is good. Let's calm down, it's okay now. So what you need to do is to contain those animals at least for a minimum of 60 to 190 days. But that containment would have a lot of demands. The first and the most important demand, and Kela, this is where the problem of livestock business in Nigeria lies, is the availability of forage. Because you will need to feed, and I can tell you this, we have about 24 million cattle, supposedly. You'll be needing 500 million kg of grass to be able to feed them on a weekly basis. If you're going to be feeding them in that ranch, containment. And this is why one of the things you see before you see anybody talk about all the places that you've mentioned now is that you see their bands. And that's why the popular, it's easier to find a needle in a haystack. Haystack is grass that are stacked up for livestock.
Okay, Mr. Kego, there's a couple of things you've mentioned again, and it's the way bringing them all together. You've regional development, and I wrote here regional development versus state government. How would that collaboration work out? Because bringing it to this livestock and the forced migration of the cattle and their owners, one would think wherever they are migrating from, the states around that axis, whether north or south, because they are migrating from all around. So from whichever angle they are migrating from, one would think that those states could say, okay, let us plant grass and create a location where they can come into. And they are fed, they can be paying a token for whatever. That's a source of revenue generation. The plant, the cattle, and then someone can say, I want to buy a cow. I want to buy one cow for something, and knows I will go to Enugu, I'll go to Kaduna, I'll go to Gombe, or this is where the market is. One will be thinking that the states can be thinking in that direction. Now, also, this regional government, at what point do we demarcate their role? Clearly stated, I mean regional development rather, at what point do we demarcate what their regional development agencies under the regional development ministry are going to be doing as against what the states are going to be doing?
There's no need for the demarcation.
Okay.
There's no need for it. What you just need to do is to create a collaboration. And in creating this collaboration is for you to now allocate responsibilities. First and foremost, remember that the federal government does not own as much land as the state does. Okay? Remember that you've talked about planting this forage. All right? And if land is in the hands of a local government or the state government, there is nothing that stops the regional commissions from first and foremost identifying one, land, and allocating lands for forage, and then do it in collaboration with the federal government using NAUDA to now do the land clearing, and using the Ministry of Agriculture, okay, and then their supporting institutions to now start planting these species of forage. If you come to my center in Abuja here, I have about 6 or 7 of them I've planted, and a lot of those seeds, surprisingly, I got from Ghana. Ghana has done a lot of it. So what it is we're trying to do is to showcase that, I mean, this is not rocket science. Three of us here somehow are linked to, in fact, yours is even worse. You know, if your father-in-law is not dead, it's better start saving money for a cow. The day the man drops dead, Neto, you are dragging one cow into your in-laws. Okay? So it's become culture, it's become spiritual to us. I mean, I had this and the guy never forgave me. There's this time they were doing some mass burial of some people that Fulani or headsmen had, whoever had slaughtered, and then he sent me the video where they were feeding them. And I said, is that meat that is in that food? I hope it's not cow meat. For the next 5 minutes, there was nothing on earth he didn't tell me. But the message was clear, I mean, so. This has become traditional. Kela, you're a woman. And no matter how close anybody is to your husband, if you don't have meat in your soup, no matter how close they are, you won't bring out that soup. You here. I mean, please say I'm talking nonsense. Just meat.
Listen, you know what? So, permit me to drag this conversation to Ayo, who has been, he has some questions that we wanted to ask. Ayo, over to you.
Well, thank you, Nyota. One of the things that readily comes to my mind to ask, still in the same space of the conversation that we're having, is what do you think is, I mean, you said something that I have repeated countless times on this program, that the federal government doesn't have so much land. The states have all the land. So when the federal government, for instance, pronounces that we're going to take X number of people out of poverty, we're going to do this in agriculture, we'll do that in agriculture, we have X 500,000 or so hectares of land, you know, for agriculture in the various states. It sounds to me like a call for collaboration. So I'm wondering, from your perspective and in your opinion, is that collaboration happening? If it is happening, how come we don't see it? If it is not happening, why not?
It's not happening because you don't have that resource base, okay, that can be able to give impetus to your plans. First and foremost, if you're talking about 500,000 hectares of land, you need to show clearly where they are. Now, showing clearly where they are, yes, everybody says to you, we'll have 82 million hectares of land. Where are they? And then how ready are they for them to be able to do what it is you want to do? That's one. And this is why in my beginning I talked about, you know, statistics as being very basic. So you are no longer making political statements or wish lists. You are now, you know, making policy pronouncements that are backed by clear programs and actions. That's the difference. Okay, and for you to be able to create that collaboration, the first thing you need to do is to be able to now identify, you know, the issues, the activities, the players, and of course the funding. And yes, and how you're going to be getting either your ROI or your ROE, whichever comes, you know, first. So that you can now make it a business, no longer some social program. And the moment you make it a business, this is now where your private sector begins to come in. So it's all about your data and statistics. That's very critical. And it's just not for you to go and plug this data out by, you know, doing scoping studies or doing some imaginary elucidation. You need, it needs to be fact-based, okay? It needs to be primary. So that when you're saying that you want to establish farms in 500,000 hectares of land? Who has done the soil testing? Where is the water going to be coming from? You know, what seeds are you going to be planting there? Are they DNA logged? Do you have people who are, you know, now multiplying these seeds for you? And ABCD. So that is why I'm saying that the first and most important ministry in trying to now do this agenda setting will be economic planning and budget. You
know, it's really disturbing and sad, if you ask me, because the president, while making a statement or two at a two-day consultative workshop on livestock reforms in Abuja recently, he said Nigeria spends approximately $1.5 billion each year on importing milk and dairy products. I think it was the Governor Ambode administration in Lagos that told us that Nigerians spend about 60 billion naira or thereabout daily on food. And we have been told countless times the thousands of cows that are slaughtered daily in Nigeria. So the point here is the market is there. We have everything it takes. I'm looking at a PwC document now as at 2020. As at year 2020, that says we spent about 22.8 trillion naira on food items in 2019. That's more than half of the total household expenditure of 40.2 trillion naira. Also underscoring, of course, the importance of food. Agriculture is set to contribute approximately 22% to the GDP, essentially saying that this is our oil. How come we don't have the sufficient collaboration to put it all together? Maybe not federal and state. How come even the regions, the geopolitical regions themselves can't come together and do something? It's not that it can't be done. Lagos and Kebbi did it. So what really is the problem here? A lack of vision, a lack of will, or infrastructure? What exactly do you think are the issues?
Well, I think it's lack of the understanding of the difference between agriculture and food production. They're not the same thing, really, when you want to drill it down. And if you're talking about food production, that is where technology now has a very major role to play. And this is where you're able to now disrupt what happens in agriculture, which is now the season system. And that's why you say, you hear people say, oh, we are soon going into the season where we can no longer plant yam, where we can no longer plant corn, where we can no longer plant this. Now, that's what happens in agriculture. But in food production, what you do is that you produce all the year round because you are now supported by the right technologies. Okay, you can create the right environments for you to have that your maximum yield. So you don't have a season for pepper, season for this, season for that. I think that's one of the greatest challenges. But I'm also happy to announce that I see some efforts being made by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, to disrupt it by what they call their homestead agriculture program, where, like you have elsewhere, I think UK has started doing it, what they call urban agriculture and rooftop farming. So what we need to do is in defining food production, you also don't define it in isolation. Okay, I like the word thousands, that you used, but I'd be more comfortable if we were more definite in that statistics to say on a daily basis, we're able to move 10,000 cattle from here to here at the value of this to this, and it goes to A, B, C, D. Now, if you keep moving, if you now start looking at that source, you can now start doing your mapping against the source to say, how consistent is this? How are we able to rebuild, the stock that you're slaughtering? Because it takes minimum of about 18 months to start growing cattle to a point where you can, get it to slaughter. But in some claims, because of feeding, and best practices, you can actually get them fattened, move them from maybe 100 kg to 500, 300, depending on what it is you want to achieve in a maximum of 90 days. But what is first and most important is that you need to put identities, okay, to those cattle. You need to know who owns them, where they are coming from, what they are coming here to do. If they're on forced migration, you need to know how long they want to stay to go back. If they're here to stay, then you need to now plan a program of maybe shared prosperity, where the owners okay, the government, and this is where even the host communities can begin to collaborate. You can create a program that makes it possible for the host community to contribute maybe forage, security, water, and then the people bring in their cattle. Somebody brings in the value systems, you know, meat processing and all that. Some other person, this is how you build these corporations, you know, that people actually academically call value chains. You cannot bring everybody together and then you have an economy that is functional.
Well, you know, you say you like the word thousands and you like something a little more definite. Information available says we consume about, in Lagos alone, we consume between 8,000 and 10,000 cattle. And in Nigeria, about 90,000 cows daily. That's according to former Minister of Agriculture, Aldo. And Lagos alone spends about 3 billion naira on food value chain in a day. 3 billion naira, that's quite a lot of money. So I'm wondering, so if we know all of these, forgive me, sir, I'm going to stay on this issue of collaboration. Now, there is the Ministry of Agriculture and there is Ministry of Livestock Production. There is the Ministry of Water Resources. There is the Ministry of Trade and Industry. I understand. I mean, you must be aware of the special agro-industrial processing zones. Well, $538 million initial sum for 7 states plus the FCT that was guaranteed by the federal government. So all of these collaborations have to happen. Otherwise, no plan, just as you said, is going to fructify. So what are the critical things that need to play out one step after the other as we make progress?
I'll stay with the statistics. This again are assumptions or postulations, if you may, because if you're killing 90,000 cattle every day, you won't have any left out of the 224 million that we claim we have. And those statistics have remained very static. And if you just look at what I told you, remember or recall what I said a little earlier, it takes you 2 to 3 years to be able to regrow or get cattle to that point where you can take it to slaughter. And we don't have agro practices that ensure this multiplication. Okay, so cattle, livestock is dwindling. What you have more are those who are forced migration. But instead, with your collaboration, cattle is an economy that you can value. You're just looking at the meat. You've not even looked at the blood. You're not even looked at the skin. You're not even looked at the horns. In fact, I'd gone to a place in Germany where, you know, they use cow horns to do what they call CLC, cellular lightweight concrete, that takes houses to 4 floors without iron. I didn't say I read it. I was there in the factory. Okay, so now there are so much you can be able to do, but what I think we're missing here, and this is the point I'm trying to make, is that we need to do our back-end planning. The moment you don't have that back-end planning, a lot of talk is cheap. I mean, you can talk about how big, how wide, how much. Now, who are these abattoirs? First and foremost, I give you this challenge, and please, maybe you can take on this. Go to that abattoir in Lagos and let them show you where they are containing 9,000 cattle a day.
Okay, sir.
Where they're flooding it. And
we really have to go. We really have to go. It's okay, good. Yes. Thank you so much for coming in this morning. But this conversation, I'm sure we're not done with it. We'll get back to it and we'll still bring you back. Thank you once again.
Pleasure.
Dr. Emeka Okegu is a policy analyst and he joined us to share.
You can also add chief to it because of where we're coming for
okay, chief.
For your father-in-law.
All right, Sunrise Daily. We'll be back after the business morning on Sunrise Daily. Just stay with us.
Well, hello, welcome. It's the last trading week of October right here in Lagos, Nigeria. Happy Monday. Well, let's get to the top stories that set your agenda. With a lot of drama playing out in the global oil market, oil prices slid more than 4% today as Israel strikes on Iran over the weekend. We're dubbed as limited, by local media, but we see city analysts discounting chances of an escalation that disrupts oil supply. So that's what investors are concerned about. What's going to happen with supplies, what's happening with demand, and we see that impacting on the prices there. Brent almost losing that $70 range down 4.34%, $72.75 a barrel, while the U.S. grade WTI crude, that lost that $70 level, $68.52 a barrel, down about 4.54%. We see, Israel on Saturday attacked Iran's military installations in 3 provinces in response to Tehran launching ballistic missiles at Israel. That was for October 1st. From news agencies, they reported the attack, which killed 4 soldiers, had inflicted limited damages. The strike steered clear of oil and nuclear and civilian infrastructure locations. We see local news networks said that Iran's oil industry operation is underway, normally with no disruptions. But we see, investors always overreact. For weeks now, markets had braced themselves for an Israeli retaliation as Middle East tensions have continued to rise following an attack on Israel by Iran-backed Hamas on October 7 last year. All markets' key consideration had been a direct engagement between both parties, with concern of an attack on Iranian oil facilities, rising, in recent weeks. But we're seeing a big drop there, 4.34% to start the week. We'll be monitoring these prices, but it's already starting off weak. Might be a weekly drop there for the oil markets come Friday when we analyze everything that's played out in the market. Let's get a check on the FX market. We see the NAFEX appreciated by about 18 naira 53 kobo to fix at 1,638 naira 65 kobo due to the central bank's intervention. As usual, for NFM, we saw a marginal gain on Friday, 0.07%, about 7 basis points drop there, still holding that 1,600 naira psychological level from a close of 1,601 naira. But NAFEX, that's where we saw some gains there, 1.12%, 1,638 naira 65 kobo. That was the close there. So analysts expect this week it might remain, relatively stable, barring any big, economic news or other big, maybe some kind of over demand, over supply. But definitely we're still expecting some kind of stable moves there in the FX market. Well, after 1 week of deliberations, the curtain falls on the 2024 IMF World Bank annual meetings in Washington in the United States with promise to build on initiatives and suggestions shared for a better global economy. Our business editor, Ini Jomekwa, who's been covering the week-long event, captured high points in this next report. Take a listen.
The 2024 annual meetings opened on a bright note. The International Monetary Fund sees worldwide inflation cool from 6.7% in 2023 to 5.8% in 2024 and 4.3% in 2025.
We will cherish the good news, and rightly so, because we haven't had much of it lately. The big global inflation wave is in retreat. A combination of resolute monetary policy action, easing supply chain constraints, and moderating food and energy prices is guiding us back in the direction of price stability.
It was not an easy path to achieve this, and the president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, denounced the lessons.
Entirely was affected by that. But I think to have the ability and the humility to recognize that, okay, we got that wrong, and we need to reassess, and we need to re-examine what analytical tools we have, what models we use, how we are prepared to be receptive to different indicators and instruments. I think that was helpful as well.
Due to geopolitical
Unfortunately,
tensions,
the low-income countries are still struggling with high inflation and interest rates, and the risk of elevated inflation for other parts of the world is not over.
There are reasons to remain vigilant. Oil prices have been rising, in part due to geopolitical tensions, and services inflation remains stubbornly high in many countries. Further trade restrictions could also push up goods inflation. Bringing inflation back to target should remain the priority.
Ajay Bunga for his thoughts on the topic.
Among other approaches of staying cautious, the World Bank Group is calling for attention to agriculture and food as engine of sustainable growth and jobs creation.
We've spoken about the potential of agribusiness. We are combining a new way of working with a new level of investment, doubling our agri-finance and agri-business commitments across the group to $9 billion annually by 2030.
Another highlight of the year's meeting is the 80th anniversary of the IMF and the World Bank Group. The commemoration comes with responsibilities and the need to adapt to new global challenges. There are requests to the form of changes from member countries.
Civil society organizations in Africa and in Nigeria in particular are demanding and requesting for a total reforms in the governance framework and relation, in IMF World Bank. This is because we believe that there's need to democratize and ensure more transparency and accountability in the IMF World Bank, framework. It is absolutely important to understand that many countries in Africa, economy is falling down, and lack of information from both governments in countries and also from the IMF that will hold government accountable for its financial dealings with financial institutions, continue to create gaps, continue to create doubt, continue to create rumors.
The global financial architecture itself is not fully reformed. Either when a country comes to the IMF for loan, or if they go to the global market for loan, there are structural impediments that are there. One of those is the rating, the work of the rating agency. So African leaders are still asking that, while the third share has been added, this is not enough.
It's been an intense week of conversations, and every part of the world has been represented, and their issues have been brought to the table from the countries who are debt-stressed, the low-income countries, and the developed countries, the developing countries, and their issues have also been discussed during the meetings in this past week. The results should be by this time next year, during the annual meetings of 2025. After consultation, some of those reforms that will help both the IMF and the World Bank handle financial issues of the world more fairly will be brought to the table with the intention to build a new phase for the two institutions. And then after that, by 2026, the world will be heading to Thailand for Thailand 2026, and I'm sure they are preparing to host the world then. But for now, I'm John Mekwa signing out from Washington, D.C. at the annual meetings venue.
Yeah, so much to unpack there, and we also, had speak to some high-level delegates. One was with Iyabo Masha, the director, G24 Secretariat, who spoke about global fragmentation and geopolitical risks. Take a listen.
We took certain positions on the geopolitical tensions that are going on around the world. I think one way to look at it is that the world is now at a stage where the rules of the game that were established 80 years ago in Bretton Woods are no longer functioning for today's society. The world is more digitalized. There is freer movement of capital, lots of issues around different geopolitical blocks. So that then means that the organizations have to be reformed to make them more relevant to today's world. And that is why a lot of the discussion focused on that what are the key reforms that should happen within the Bretton Woods system to make them more relevant. I think top on the agenda for the G24 is the issue of governance reform of the two institutions. The two institutions when they were set up, the membership was dependent on the size of the economy of the countries. So at that time, of course, 80 years ago, the dominant economies are different from what they are now. And now the G24 countries control more than 60% of the global economic transactions. So we're asking for a review of the governance framework, the formula on which the quota is organized, so that when developing countries have more say in the governance structure of the institutions, then we can have the kind of policies that foster integrity. So if you look at the top 10 economies in the world, at least 4 of them are members of the G24. China, Brazil, India, they're all members of the G24. So substantively, in terms of what policies we are advocating for, apart from the governance policies, we also think that the organizations need to reform their financing model so that they can better support countries. So in the case of the World Bank, a lot of proposals are on the table to optimize its balance sheet so that it can leverage better, but it can also lend better to developing countries. There's also the issue of potentially a capital increase, because when you look at the total resource envelope, compare it to the needs of the economy of it, we're talking of roughly $1 trillion a year until 2030 to meet development and climate goals. So the World Bank has to be in a position to deploy more resources, and that will inevitably call for capital increase. And they're also, within the IMF, they're reforming the SDR, which is, if I can put it simply, the IMF money, in such a way that a multilateral development bank like the Africa Development Bank can utilize this money and use it as a hybrid capital instrument that they can use to lend to other countries. So those are the kind of things going on the financing side. But then there are other issues around the vulnerabilities of the country. Many countries are either at medium or high risk of debt distress, many of the developing countries, or even those that are not at debt distress, that is, they are solvent, they have liquidity problem. So we have also made some proposals on how to address that. The ones that have liquidity problems, we're calling for the establishment of a market-based mechanism that they can use when there are unwarranted declines in their bond prices, so that they're not becoming insolvent. It's just liquidity. These are countries with sound fundamentals, countries that are running very good economic rules-based system. So that way, if we have this mechanism in place, which is already in place in the European Union, they have it in place. The US Federal Reserve has swap lines with some countries, central banks. So we want to see something like that for developing countries. Then for the ones that are at debt distress, then that's a different kind of arrangement. We want a debt resolution framework that would provide them with very comprehensive debt resolution. And that includes the timeliness, but also what kind of restructuring they get. How does the resolution going forward enables them to better handle their debt?
Welcome back. Well, so much to unpack from the IMF World Bank annual meetings with recommendations on managing global debts, growth and balancing, both to manage risk ahead. Well, joining us to analyze is Mr. Farouk Khailan, is the CEO Premium Africa Holdings. It's great to have you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning, Ladi. How are you doing? I'm
great, thank you. So first of all, let me get your key takeaways from this year's annual meeting.
It's been 80 years since the IMF was established, 1944. We haven't seen major shift in terms of significant impact, particularly on Africa. It's always been an institution that our leaders run to when there seems to be some economic distress. Some have called it a lazy approach. But in the nutshell, meeting happened. It was very important that it happened. There was a lot of stock taken. You realize that key components of this year's discussions were global economic resilience, debt management, and then climate finance. The issue of surcharge policy by the IMF was also very well, trumpeted at the meetings. There was, stakeholders, including myself, advocates who say that if these surcharge fees, which are the additional fees that is, placed on economies with high debt, if it could be remodified or, to boldly even eliminate, it will create a situation where IMF's lending is less, pro-cyclical, and then also be more supportive in economic downtimes. There were those who also came, to talk about debt relief, the usual suspects being Africa, and also it was important that conversations were aligned. If you also look at the narrative, there was also the need for some sort of, alignment between the currently important conversations around climate and then sustainable, debt mechanisms. So it was a good meeting in a nutshell. I see that the World Bank leader is speaking the language that we've always been speaking. Let's diversify our economies. Let's look at agriculture. And I think after this meeting, we will see some shift in policy. Reforms will be very, prominent across the region. But we also need to monitor closely if indeed these call for reforms are being adhered to.
Right, and there was also talk about, most of the oil exporting countries, in sub-Saharan Africa with growth not matching, all of that oil production and exports, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. So what kind of policies do you think, need to be put at the forefront at this point, so that we can see some kind of regional economic growth and maybe find new sources of growth for most of these countries in sub-Saharan Africa?
Yes, I think to address these complexities of uneven, economic growth, it hinges on a few, points that needs to be addressed. It's very important that we shift towards, shift away from oil dependence by investing in sectors such as agriculture. Like I earlier said, the World Bank, leader was very emphatic on that. We should look at manufacturing. Technology is here to allow us to create more, balanced growth across the region. It's also important that we look at enhancing our revenue management, implementing very transparent policies, sovereign wealth funds to manage oil revenues effectively, reducing fiscal vulnerabilities. And also it's important to ensure that equitable regional development so that we all grow together at a certain appreciable scale. Infrastructure development cannot be taken out when we're looking at, presenting solutions, investing in very critical infrastructure, including transportation, power, digital network. We should also look at how to support non-oil sectors, and we also connect remote regions to economic hubs. A lot of times when we are making these decisions, there's a disconnect between, rural areas and then the major economic hubs. There's a very important conversation that needs to be had to ensure that it's significantly connected. Governance and anti-corruption measures is also very key. We need to strengthen institutions. Africa has been, had an authority for strengthening individuals rather than institutions. We need to strengthen these institutions to be able to combat corruption, because corruption always takes us back, to ensure that oil revenue benefits reach local communities. That's regional, ensuring that reducing regional disparity and fostering inclusive development is very important. So these are some of the solutions that I think we should be able to adapt as early as possible, because like you mentioned, there seems to be some unevenness across board in terms of how we are developing as a continent. Oil, the time for oils for our development is becoming more limited, and the transition is happening, and it's happening very fast. It's important that we sit well to be able to, not to miss out on the bounce of the ball. And we also had the economic managers from, Nigeria and, some other
African countries, and they had to have, conversations, with investors that were present at the meeting. In your view, do you think, investors are comfortable, at this time to say, you know what, all right, let's pile in some of these funds into a country, say like Nigeria, and how should Nigeria position, for that, going forward? Because we keep talking about attracting and growing our FDI, at this point.
Well, one very, very key component of attracting investment is currency stability. A couple of weeks ago, we were having a conversation, particularly about Nigeria. It would interest you to know that in the corridors that I'm operating, Nigeria comes up a lot strongly because it has numbers, it has a massive youth population. So it appeals to investors and is always on the dashboard in terms of the next, opportunity to address. But every time some sort of research is done, instability in currency, it becomes a concern. So as advisors to some of these, high net worth individuals and investors, we always say that, look, we are monitoring government to adapt exchange rate policies that reduces volatility and provide a more stable environment for foreign investment. Helping stabilizing inflation and boosting investor confidence is very critical. So I would always place it at, exchange rate stabilization is very critical, and that cannot be avoided. Every investor is looking at, this very key, elements of economies to be able to make decisions to ensure that their investments are safe. And in a case where technically you cannot rule that out, definitely there was going to be some amount of capital flight, and exchange rates play a key role in that. So I think that we should look at the exchange rate conversations keenly. I'm monitoring, I'm seeing that, yes, the central bank is making very bold decisions. It's not resonating well with the citizens, but let's look at the long-term effect of those decisions, and then I'm sure we will be able to have a conversation around the outcomes.
Right, and we get most of these recommendations. Most of the time, it's really painful, especially for the citizens. And, looking at this whole, currency stability issue, is it time to just full on peg the Naira, at this point so that, everyone just feels comfortable? What do you think?
Yes. I mean, those who have said that, look, we need to be very bold. We need to grab the bull by the horn and make these decisions. I'm not going to move away too far away from that. I think it's important is if it's pegged. And one thing I also want to appreciate that we should be very inventive. We should be bold. At this point, some people have raised their hands in despair, lost, and has been thrown in. Why don't we also adapt certain bold policies? It might not be popular, but trust me, in the culture of, being proactive, the sense of urgency. If you look at what is happening, I never stop talking about Middle East. It's an economy strategy that goes to say, let's do this, let's try this. We've got nothing to lose. Worst case scenario, we go back to what we already know. Or even in the process of being inventive, we're going to learn. So I'm not going to rule that out at all. But then it needs to come with a lot of education, a lot of collective stakeholder engagement. That decisions should be made across board. Every individual or institution that is directly involved in currency conversations, currency management, fiscal policy, monetary policy, should be involved to make that decision. And I'm sure that the outcome will be inspiring. If not, we're going to learn from it and go back to the drawing board and make certain decisions again.
This shift towards, green energy, and definitely it will impact African oil producers. Is the best time yesterday, for these countries to start fully, exploring, that we've been talking about the great transition, at this point? Should they start channeling all of those funds into that now?
It is, this is what we've always been talking about, that sense of urgency of Africa. We sat down for transition to hit us. We had so much oil, we had to make good use of it, use this oil to develop our economies. We were snail pacing, we weren't too serious about it. It was business as usual. Look at what has happened to the Middle East. Middle East has used oil to develop its economy significantly and even moved away from oil reliance long time ago, moved into tourism, moved into agriculture, moved into other sectors of the economy, and are already miles ahead of us. Now transition is here. We didn't maximize on what oil was supposed to do for us. And even when it comes to the transition, same culture of, snail pacing, business as usual. Documents are sitting at policy framers' office, it's not leaving. Somebody has to sign, he has traveled to a funeral. It's a major concern. Now the transition is here. We don't also want to miss out on this opportunity. Whether we like it or not, the transition is happening. Let's see some investment in solar. Let's go hard in solar, wind energy, hydropower could offset revenue loss from oil, whilst leveraging Africa's rich natural resources. We have the natural resource when it comes to renewable energy. Impeccable amounts of it. But like I said, the earlier we make good use of it, the better for us.
Right.
That sense of urgency should be now. It should be now, Ladi. We cannot wait anymore.
Right.
Natural gas as a transition fuel should also be used to, to bridge the gap. Because as the transition is happening, a lot of African countries have significant gas reserves that can, can serve as a bridge fuel during the energy transition, using that to support both regional energy demand and export opportunities as well.
All right, we already see Nigeria relying heavily on gas for this transition process. But it's always great having your perspective. Thank you so much for coming on, Mr. Farouk Kailan, CEO, Premium Africa Holdings. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ladi. Always a pleasure.
All right, let's get a quick check on how the markets played out last week. 1.41%, that's for the all-share index. Closing at the week, 99,448 points. The markets are open now. We'll see if this bullish trend continues. We'll see the market cap, a massive 60 trillion, that's for the market cap. Let's look at activity for the week. We see volumes up about 2.14 billion units. That was traded last week. You see investor appetite was really strong last week, 85 billion. That was the value deals, 41,217, all in the green. Let's look at the top sectors now. See banking led the pack last week, 7.86%. Consumer goods was the only one in the red, 0.84% down. Then we also see insurance, that's also in financial services, also up by 4.04%. Oil and gas, 3.95%. So markets are open now. We'll see if investors, continue in this last trading week of October from the bullish sentiment and maybe cross above the 100,000 for the all-share index. Markets are open now. We'll give you an update at 1 p.m. on how trading is going locally and most of the global markets we track. I'm Ladi Williams. That's it from me on Business Morning. I hand things back over to the Sunrise Daily team.
Welcome back to Sunrise Daily right here on Channels Television. And now let's talk football. Recently, we heard about everything that happened between the Nigerian team and the team from Libya. And all of the back and forth culminated in this fine that was given to the Libyan Federation, $50,000, and awarding Nigeria 3 points. And then, of course, we're looking at the AFCON qualifiers, that'll be coming up shortly. We still have to beat the team from Benin, and then, of course, we move on. But let's take a look at what has happened. The result of this particular fine that has been placed on the Libyan Federation and the points that are awarded to Nigeria as we continue the AFCON. Joining us right now, Mr. Ida Peterside, former Nigerian goalkeeper, joining us in Nigeria. I hear you're back. Good morning and welcome to the program.
I'm Nigerian. It's good to be back.
Good to have you here with us. Let's start off with everything that happened. I'm tempted to go back. I'm seeing a statement from Nigerian goalkeeper. I think Nwabali said 50K for Eba. I think I just saw that online right now. But what do you make of this fine, this $50,000 fine, and the points awarded to us as we continue with AFCON?
Well, I think we have to look at fair play. You know, we don't want to build the Libyans because somebody's angry or somebody's bitter. It's just to send them a lesson, to say what you did was absolutely wrong. So that other countries, $50,000 is a lot of money, so that other countries can understand that, sorry, my phone is moving forward. Other countries can understand that you don't do this. That it's unacceptable to do this to a national team. So the fine for me is appropriate. And the only thing I didn't like about the decision is that they should have been banned, say, 3 games, or, you know, for playing those 3 games in Libya. That's just the only thing I think would have been more. But the money has to be considerable.
Let's give him some time to handle that phone call.
Please sort out that phone.
Sort out that phone that is ringing so we can focus on our conversation here. I mean, he's asking for more.
Someone is seeing me on TV and
calling you. So he's saying more, Nelta. He wants more punishment. But we hear that the Libyan Federation are they've hired a lawyer. They're going to be suing, I guess, to find some kind of, way that they do not have to pay these penalties and fines. But you're asking for more. And you mentioned that this should be a lesson to other teams, that you don't treat a national team like this. Talk to us about this game. There's always that back and forth, especially when countries have history, especially when countries have histories of, banter and fighting with each other, so to speak. It's a game, But you're saying there's a lesson that needs to be learned. Has it gone too far?
Yes, it has. It has. They have a history of treating visiting teams very wrongly. They did that to Eyimba when Eyimba went to play against the Libyan side. They did that to Rivers United. In the case of Rivers United, it was worse. They left them at the airport for 24 hours. So they have this, people know that this is what they do when you come to play in Libya. So I think the CAF would have had or seen a lot of reports and complaints from a lot of countries and needed to teach them this lesson. And moreover, you don't do that. You don't do that. The story would have been different. We had about 60 people in that plane. The story would have been different if there was a clash, or they are in the Sahel where they have a lot of terrorism. If someone had come to terrorize the team or kidnap someone, it would have been terrible. So it was a good lesson, good decision by CAF. Libyans are protesting, and I think there's no reason for them to protest. There's absolutely no reason. They didn't act very professional. They faltered in so many ways. CAF was lenient with them, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's, while we're rejoicing, so to speak, because some will say, we should be rejoicing, getting the full 3 points and 3 goals that gets Nigeria through to the next AFCON, even though there's one more game to go. But while we're rejoicing in this space of added points, added goals, should we really be rejoicing? Look at our play, our game and our build-up. Again, we see our World Cup qualifiers. Should we really be rejoicing?
Well, I think there's been a lot of improvement since the World Cup came up. In the last 2 games we've played, yes, no team is a minor anymore in Africa. Look at how, even the Libyans that will beat 1-0, you find out that the goalkeeper was man of the match. He made about 6-7 tremendous saves. We have improved from the last game we played when Finidi was in charge, till now. There's been a lot of improvement. We're settled. For me, football is qualified. Years ago, they would say, but I can't play well, about win. Who cares how much well you played? Just win the games. There's the wins that give you the trophy. So I think we're in a good space, and we're building up to the Nations Cup. We've qualified. It relaxes every nerve that we can start planning for the AFCON.
Okay, so let's look at that matter of we've qualified. We're building up to the AFCON, and indeed we're building up to other tournaments. And see, in the process of building, there is that school of thought that says we have individual players, but we don't have a team. Would this new move by the government of Nigeria to bring the Sports Commission to manage our sports, do you think it will help to build the kind of teams we need in the different sports, not just talking football now?
I want to say this, and we're all excited, those of us in the football fraternity. We're excited because for the very first time, very first time, in over 30 years, we have a sports person running our sports. Right? That's the joy. If you look at all the forum, everyone discussing, Alhaji Shehu Diko has been part of our system. He has been the Secretary General of the NFF. He's been he's been in the NFF for years, in different committees. He's even in FIFA, as one of the assessors. So he's been in the system for a very long time. He knows our pain. He knows what the struggles are. Yes, it's an enormous task in the sense that he's not just managing football anymore. He's managing sports in Nigeria. It's a good thing. It's an absolutely good thing. He has to be strong. He has to be strong and take decisions. Those decisions that people need to begin to see that decisions are taken. It's no longer politics. If he were a minister of sports, and I told some of my friends, if he were a minister of sports, all he would be doing is wearing big suits and big agbada and discussing politics, APC, PDP, but that's away from it. He's been given a responsibility to manage sports. And he's well capable, and I've said this to him so many times. He's absolutely well capable. I've seen him write reports. I've seen him. You need to see how intelligent this man is when it concerns sports. It is the will to deliver that we're talking about. He needs to get people that love the game, love the sports around him and say, let's get this thing done. For me, he has to be given a contract. That's what I think. We don't want him to play politics. Give him a contract. 5 years, 6 years, 7 years.
It's that matter of politics. Politics has been a bane, as some will say, the bane of Nigerian sports. Politics has been the bane of Nigerian sports. So that politicking now, can we say we are on the verge of taking politics out of sports so that we look at building the talents that abound across this country?
Totally. But again, life is politics. He has to play politics to survive, right? And the beautiful thing about this appointment I hear is that he reports directly to the president, which is beautiful. So all the bureaucracy of whom do I see, whom do I please, whom do I talk to get to where I'm going to, is out. He reports directly to the president. Yes, a ministerial position, almost like that, with that kind of standing, but he has a kind of independence to take decisions. What I think he has to do, I don't know whether it's necessary to get a board. If he has to get a board, yes, get a board. Or get think tanks, get people around him and say, this is where I'm leading. I know you can do this. I know you can be strong in refurbishment of stadiums, in taking some decision, in representing Nigeria in the foreign fray. He has to get people around him that understand the politics of the sports and that they are strong. Okay, and strong. We must bring changes. A whole lot of things are not properly done. Look at what happened in the Olympics. It was a mess, the absolute mess. That Nigeria, as huge as we are, I don't know how many were because they quote the numbers like Bible scriptures. But get a strong body. Put your foot down. Things must be done on time. Preparation for the Olympics on time. Our sports, again, he knows he's part of us. The NFF status must be changed. There are a lot of associations that need to be sorted out. It's an enormous task, but he has to bring everybody and say, I'm in charge of sports in Nigeria, and this is where I'm going. And once he does that...
You are right in noting that it's been quite a mess, for the past few years, especially with football in Nigeria. And then, of course, even with other sports, how we're handling our players in other sports. But, last Friday he was speaking at an event and he said, that's Mr. Shehu Diko, he actually said that he's going to create a strong foundation. That's what he said. A strong foundation that will transform sports in Nigeria.
Yes.
What do you think his chances are going to be? I mean, we've talked about the political side of things. If a minister had to deal with all of that, and we still didn't do well with the commission and him, answering directly to the president. What do you think his chances are going to be? And what are some of the challenges that you think he would face in trying to re-strategize our sports sector?
When I started, I said he's one of us. So he understands what sports is all about. If you bring a politician, he'll be talking about party structure. He'll be talking about pleasing party. But no, he's not. Yes, he could be a party man, I don't know. But we all know Shehu Diko as a sportsman, as a sports person. He has a voice in FIFA. He has a voice in Nigeria. He runs the sports. And he will not have any excuse if he fails, because we will say, we've all glamoured for sports commission. In America, there are no sports ministers. Even in Britain, hardly. I had a story of one sports minister traveling with a team, and they find him. What are you going to do there? Don't you have people? That's how it must be. He's in charge of our sports. He needs people around him. He needs to put his foot down. And especially, okay, it's a shame and a disgrace that we have, especially in football, one functional stadium that is privately owned, which is the stadium in Akwa Ibom, the Godswill Akwa Ibom Stadium. It can't be said of Nigeria. And we have stadiums that are owned by the government. We have the one in Lagos, we have the one in Abuja. And I think the one in Kaduna, I'm not too sure, is owned by the federal government. You need to say, let's get our structures right. Let's have a sports village. We must get a sports village where our players, years ago, we used to have that village in Surulere, where players would come together. They can go and train and prepare for events. We don't always have to spend millions and billions of naira because we're looking for venue. If you go to Holland, there's a place called the Papandal. If you come to South Africa here, there's a sports company. It's unbelievable. If you see the one in South Africa, it's absolutely unbelievable.
You're very correct. When you say that we've had that sports village, I think if memory serves me right, we call them Games Village. I think there's still one in Abuja. There's a place called Games Village in Abuja, even though it's an estate. Whether or not they are serving the purpose that you have in mind, that's another conversation altogether. Before I take you up on that question, there is this issue that Kayla, brought to our attention the other time when we're talking about things that are happening today. The International Legislative Dialogue on Women and Constitution Amendment in Nigeria is happening today at the Transcorp Hilton Hotel, and we'll be there. We're going to transit to that place now, particularly for our DSTV audience. But if you would like to continue with us on this conversation, just dash quickly to YouTube. So, Mr. Peter said, the conversation around our sports is something that is very, very concerning. Maybe I should begin from this angle. This issue, particularly of the AFCON qualifier between Nigeria and Libya. Libya is also raising issues just the way we are raising issues. Could there be anything we are missing, or anyone is missing in this particular conversation? Because they feel that they have a point. We believe that we have a point. CAF has made a ruling and they want to appeal to the same CAF. So what are the likely outcomes? Speak more as dispassionately as you can, so at least people have a fair balance of what is going on and what to expect.
Thank you, Ayo. The thing about it is sports. We can't take away the fact that it is sports. Because it is sports, we must have an enabling environment to play sports. And sports is about friendship, not war. I think there's so much, they are used to too many wars, and they still think that they have to continue to fight wars. No, sports is a friendly thing. And it's not just for the Libyans. It has to be spread abroad, that people must understand that sports brings brothers together, brings Africa together, brings humans together. We must look at it from that point of view. So it's not just because of Nigeria and Libya. It has to be a yardstick. It has to be one measuring stick that says, treat the visitors right. Let's finish the game, you go back to your country. And I think that's what, so no matter how they protest, I think, yes, they're protesting because by losing 3 points, they're automatically out. So their intention was that if they had won the game against us, they would have had 4 points. But it's not all about points. No, it's about lives and how you treat others. So I'm not sure they will succeed. If they take this thing further, CAF might even come heavier on them and take a heavier decision.
Well, So that is one thing, perhaps for many Nigerians, very, very cheering and comforting. But speaking to the larger issue of our sports, it's also, quite concerning. The experience that we had recently, I think, with the Olympics, where we hardly got anything and we spent so much, is something that, of course, you have also spoken to that one as well as so many other people in the country. Now, speaking to the larger issue of our sports, yes, you said that sports is a friendly thing, but it's also a business. That is why we spend humongous resources to let our contingents go to different parts of the world where these things, where these engagements occur. In terms of, you've also given us the assurance that with the new person at the helm of affairs now, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. What are we to expect?
Well, I think the president that appointed him for a reason. Now, if the president if it doesn't function proper, we bring it down to leadership of the presidency and the decision is taken.
But at the end of the day, my apologies, just 1 second. At the end of the day, it's all about leadership. No, we don't expect him to be the one to go run or fight or shoot or whatever. It's about leadership. What was the leadership gap, is the question I'm trying to put to you, that was missing in our sports administration or sports development? What's the gap that we need to fill so we don't continue to talk about the same thing over and over again?
It has to still be leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Now, a leader must appoint the right people. He must get the right people. They call them the right people in the right peg, in the right hole. That's what the challenge is. You don't bring somebody and because you know him, you like him, he's your brother, you say, run this, he will run it down. You don't do that. He will run it down. So when a person like Diko that has been part of the system has paid the price, at a particular point, it was so bad for him, they arrested him and wanted to put him in jail. At a particular point, they accused him of this and accused him of that. So he knows the difficulties of leadership in sports. And we all glamour. And like I said, he contested with me for the presidency of the NFF. And he saw the mess there. What happened in that election? You can't allow things like this to continue. At the end of that election, we were together. He was so bitter and angry. He said, this is not sports. This is what we're saying. Who is in charge? They've given us somebody that is part of the system, part of the sporting fraternity. Our challenges. Our stadiums are not in good shape. The running of the system, the looking after the players. The players complain from who are the architects of sports. They complain every year. They are not being looked after. Remunerations are not being paid. There are no camping facilities. There are no equipment. These are teething problems. But you see, like I said, a politician will come who want to please his paymaster or please the people that brought him in there. And before you know, the tracksuit that you will take to go to Olympics, they'll be wearing it in the parliament, while the players don't have it. But if you're part of the sporting system, it is the players first. It is those that are involved in the game first. Once you look after them, it trickles down and everything begins to change.
Well, that is, hopefully cheering. But then there is also the place of vision in our sports development. I'm looking at the past. Forgive me. I can't help but celebrate what we had. I don't remember a time when, particularly in the 70s and the 80s, where people, when you talk about foreign teams back then, the most prominent was probably Dundee United, and it wasn't even for a good reason. I also remember my uncle used to have this pamphlet that they had back then, and you'd see Arsenal and the rest of them, all of them in the very late 70s and the 80s and all of those things. I found some of those things in his library. So but then we had fantastic teams at the time. We had the stationery stores, the ICC Shooting Stars, the Rangers International, Water Corporation, and the rest of them came later. There's this team in Boko where Rashidi Yekini was fished out from, and the rest of them. So we had all of that. Then we had the Abiola Babes. We have such fantastic teams, fantastic leagues, that we even had first, second, and third, divisions of our football at the time. So did we have in basketball and several others like that, such that when you went to boarding school, you wanted to play all kinds. I joined the cricket team when I was in secondary school. That's to tell you how vibrant our sports was then. I'm not sure where to put, that, but is it like we don't have a vision for our sports? We just want to get an accolade now and wait until the next time? What name do you see us wanting to make a name in sports in Nigeria, not just football?
You need to, thank you, very great question. You need to bring the children back outside. They need to come and play. Okay? You yourself know. When we're younger, we play street football. We come out and play table tennis, roper. I play table tennis. But you come to the street, every street. You know, the last time I went to buy a table tennis board, and I asked them, do they play table tennis on the street anymore? They said, hey, nobody does that anymore. You see, this is where you chunk out talents. You need to make it so conducive. Fix the facilities. If you come to the national stadium, remember in those days, in the national stadium, you will see 3,000 people coming to the national stadium because the facilities were working. The other day I went past the national stadium in Surulere. I saw the massive scoreboard had fallen. I don't know whether they've looked after it now, but they had the outside pitch. They had a football pitch outside. It was packed every day. But you don't see people come back. So we must go back to grassroots. Have stadiums that people can come out and play. It is important that people come out to play. They must come out to play. Make it friendlier, make it easy for people to play. And the more they play, the more you chunk out talents.
I mean, it is quite an interesting dynamic, and one that we'll be watching, to see how it all unfolds. But before we let you go, what should everyone in this area that is so important to our nation, one that unites us regardless? I mean, that's one of the greatest things about sports, isn't it? Especially sports in Nigeria. It's something that all of us have in common, something that all of us love together, and its role in nation building cannot be overstated. Those who are in charge of this, Mr. Diko right now, who's got this Herculean task in front of him, and everyone else who's going to be working with him, what should they be having at the back of their mind as they get to work?
He has to get a plan. Without a plan, you can't work. And it's been in the system. And trust me as I say this to you, he has a plan. Because I saw a paper. He delivered almost 2 years ago, a very profound read. I read that and I said, this is the way to go. He has to implement it, and it's in leadership. This is my dream. This is my vision. This is what I want us to do. Then get the right people. Please work this out for me. Can you be in charge of this for me? Can you see how we can succeed in this place? How do we restructure our system? Once you get these things together, then he begins to lead. Right? You see, we're in a mess, absolute mess. Go everywhere in this possible fraternity. You will hear complaints. You just go and pay the players. There are people that have worked for this country, suffered for this country. They are being owed for 10 years. 10 years. Camp allowances, fees. Imagine Diko gets up and gets a committee. Let's see how we can pay our ex-internationals or players that have been owed. Let's start from there. People will scream to the heavens and say, this is the man we're looking for. We need to see. He has to do something that people will see that this man means business.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ida Peter Side there, former Super Eagles goalkeeper, for being with us on the program. And I'm looking forward to having you in the studio. I'm tired of talking to you on Zoom.
I hear the tickets are expensive now. I'll be there. I'll be there one day.
Thanks again. Thank you so much. All right, well, we have quite a number of messages. Well, we have 2 messages here. I'm going to start off. Okay, so let's take this one from Green Lord at Olu4083. He says, I wish you know, he's going back to that story in Osun State. He says, I wish you know how notorious Osun police are. They are rude, he says, and untrained, especially those ones on jackets without proper uniform. The ones with uniforms are well trained with good approach. So this is something he's saying happens quite a bit.
Oh, well, that's a note to the police authorities to look into the attitudes and mannerisms of some of their officers and men. But this other one's from Professor Monoka Enakena. He says, government must be sincere in reassessing its fiscal and monetary policies and programs, its implementations and implications on the social political ecosystem, and importantly, the impact it has on the lives of ordinary folks. For example, are we actually paying subsidy? Are we going to implement policies that peculiar to Nigeria's economic growth and development space? That's a lineup of questions from Mr. Professor Enakena.
Yeah.
Oh, well, and I'm sure Ayo has a comment or two, personal comments there, of course, but I want to say thank you so much for letting us be a part of your morning. And in whatever you do, please do know this. You have your own role to play in all of this. That space where you are, what are you doing about it? Thank you for watching. I'm Neota Egbe.
Think Nigeria first. Nigeria first. Let's see how we can make things better. Have a great week ahead. I'm Kayla Magwa.
As for my comments on the all, I will keep them until next time. I'm Aya Makinde. Have a beautiful day.